and thanks for calling Sports Stories with Denny Lennon, the top-rated video podcast in the Centinela Adobe corridor. Please leave a message.
Hey Denny, this is Paul. I'd like to tell you, I really like your podcast. It's very insightful. It inspires me to write some good songs. And you know who else likes your podcast? Ringo. Hey Ringo, come talk to Denny Lennon. Hello, Denny. I like your podcast. It's got a lot of peace and love. And that's what it's all about. This world goes around with peace and love. You know, John was about peace and love. Oh, Ringo, let's not bring up John. He's not related. He's an American. It's Denny Lennon from America. Well, then why did you give me the bloody phone?
By its very nature, sports are unpredictable, visceral, and dramatic. Follow a sport or a team or a player, and you'll follow a story arc, ones that are sometimes worthy of a movie. The three sports that have had the most films made about them are boxing, American football, and baseball. It seems logical that America's pastime would lend itself to movie making, but baseball's greatest players do not exactly fare as well in acting as they do in playing ball, even when they play themselves. In 1920, the first year Babe Ruth was a New York Yankee, he played himself in a biopic called Headin' Home. He really should have never have left home. His acting was so bad, you could tell even though it was a silent film. Another all-time baseball great, Jackie Robinson, channeled himself to play the title role in the 1950 release of The Jackie Robinson Story. I mean, if you're going to have a film made about yourself in one of the most seminal moments in our country's history, I suppose you would be the one who knows how it really went down.
Suppose I collide with you at second base, and when I get up I say, you dirty black so-and-so. What do you do?
Mr. Rickey, do you want a ball player who's afraid to fight back?
I want a ball player with guts enough not to fight back. You got to do this job with base hits, stolen bases, and fielding ground balls, Jackie. Nothing else. Now I'm playing against you in a World Series, and I'm hot-headed. I want to win this game. So I go into you spikes first. You jab the ball in my ribs, and the umpire says out. High flare. All I can see is your black face. That black face right over me. So I haul off and punch you right in the cheek. What do you do?
Mr. Rickey, I've got two cheeks.
Good. You under contract with the Black Panthers?
Maybe leaving the acting to the actors is the best strategy. For my money, the best baseball actor of all time is Kevin Costner. Case in point, his role as Crash Davis in the 1988 hit movie Bull Durham. How about when Crash calls his shot and goes deep?
Come on, mate. Throw me that weak edge. You're getting that cheese by me. Bring it. Bring it. Bring it.
Costner grew up in Southern California and was, like all of us that grew up in the Southland, entertained and influenced by the Dodgers and their most valuable employee, the greatest baseball announcer of all time, Vin Scully. No one was ever better at calling a game and making it sound and feel like a movie, even if you were just listening on the radio. Can you imagine how Costner must have felt to have Vin play himself as the broadcaster for the 1999 movie For the Love of the Game, where Costner plays Billy Chappell, a pitcher, working on a perfect game in the final game of his storied career.
To push the sun back up in the sky and give us one more day of summer.
Actually, Kevin let those of us lucky enough to be at Dodger Stadium on September 24 of 2016 know exactly how he felt when he paid tribute to the GOAT of baseball broadcasters on Vin Scully night as the sun set in beautiful Chavez Ravine.
We will miss you in our radio, in our cars, in our backyard. You've been a gift to Los Angeles and to baseball itself.
Then there's a movie, the 1989 Academy Award-nominated film Field of Dreams. The final scene, which was shot during the magic hour, has touched so many people that a book has been written about it. There's a baseball field carved out of rows of corn at a farmhouse in Iowa, and Costner, playing Ray Kinsella, delivers what just might be the greatest line in baseball movie history.
Hey, Dad? You want to have a catch?
I
like that.
Well, why don't we let our guest, Ray Kinsella's dad from the movie, answer that question. I'm a Venice, California-born, Los Angeles-based sports fan, one that has played, coached, announced, and promoted sports my whole life. My love affair with sports started in my own backyard and has led me to this podcast. Thanks to the support of the Amateur Athletic Union in East Bay, I'm excited to bring you Sports Stories with Denny Lennon. Hello, sports historians, and welcome to Audio Video Podcast number 81 of Sports Stories with Denny Lennon, as we bring you our Baseball Goes to the Movie special. Our special guest on this episode is Dwier Brown, who plays Kevin Costner's dad in the pivotal scene in The Field of Dreams. Marley Rice is producing from the Buck Studios, so let's go to the movies. We're talking about the book, If You Build It, from Dwier Brown. Great book. I really did enjoy it. There's parts of it, Dwier. One of the books I read to my children often when they were little was Pablo Coelho's The Alchemist. And the beauty of like just the soul of the world will take care of you if your pursuit is noble. And there was just, I felt that kind of that feeling, that same feeling when I first read that book, and especially when I read it to my kids when they were younger. I kind of felt that like as you started to bump into people throughout your life, how good storytelling brought out that kind of emotion.
Well, you're very kind to include me with that book, but yeah, I always wanted to write a book, and I tried to write it. I tried to write it from my sort of naive farm boy point of view, because that way you sort of see the world as it was opening up to me. And, I just had so many great things happen to me and such good luck in show business, I think. And, so I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Thank you.
So you've been getting killed a lot in your plays and in movies and TV. And then you saw the script, and you had previously been introduced to the book by W.P. Kinsella, right? But you know the book Shoeless Joe, so you knew of it before you heard about the movie?
I had a high school buddy who was a creative writing major, and he had found it and sent it to me, and I just loved it. It's a really fine book, and so then and this happens in show business. Even The Thornbirds comes from a great book, and you get to read the whole novel or whatever, and get to play a character, and it is just adds to the excitement of show business, I think.
When you found out about this, it kind of seemed like you hadn't been necessarily. I mean, The Fall Guy didn't exactly fulfill you, so you had this opportunity, and you saw something significant in this. And I would imagine when you went to audition for it, there was an extra little surge or energy or something that said, let's get this.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really beautiful script, and they just don't come along that often. I mean, a lot of people who've been in show business a long time, you're usually kind of like, oh gosh, I wish this was just a little better writing. But it was such a beautiful book that it came from, and Phil Robinson, who directed it and wrote the screenplay, changed some key elements in it. I remember when I went to the audition, I wanted to audition, get there, and I wanted to ask him if there was a bigger part I could audition for. And it's because one of the great things Phil did with the book is in the novella, the character of John Kinsella appears fairly early, like maybe chapter 2 or 3, and kind of continues throughout the story. And so he doesn't have the character doesn't have the impact that my character ended up having in the movie. And so, I wanted to play one of the other ball players or something, but you go with what you can. And I'm certainly glad that, they cast me in this part, because I didn't know till we actually saw the finished product how much the whole movie is about my character, because that was something that Phil added to the book, I think, in a significant way.
Do you mind just, a quick little summary? I mean, about the book, or not the book rather, but about the story, in case and people aren't familiar with the story, the scandal that caught up the Black Sox, or the then called Black Sox, and Shoeless Joe and so forth.
Yeah. Well, basically, the story of Field of Dreams and Shoeless Joe is about an Iowa farmer, Ray Kinsella, who was played by Kevin in the movie. He hears a voice while he's out in his cornfield that says, "If you build it, he will come." And he doesn't understand it. He's never heard voices before. He's confused, but he keeps hearing this voice, and he somehow understands that it means if he builds a baseball field in the middle of his cornfield, that Shoeless Joe Jackson will get to come back from the dead and play baseball again. And for those of you who don't know, as Denny mentioned, there were in the 1919 World Series, the White Sox were accused of throwing the series, and which they lost, of course. And there was a big trial, and 9 baseball players were, I guess it was well,
I think it was
8.
8.
Yeah, from 8 men out, which is also about that. But eight men, including Shoeless Joe Jackson, were banned from baseball for the rest of their lives, even though they weren't found guilty, and even though Shoeless Joe had a better batting average than anybody on either team, had no error. There's no real evidence to support the fact that they were working hard to throw the baseball games, but they were banned from baseball nonetheless. Shoeless Joe went on to play in kind of, local leagues and textile leagues down in South Carolina where he's from, and, ended up, having the best years of his career taken away from him for what a lot of people think was an unfair, conviction, or wasn't even a conviction, actually. Anyway, in the story, Ray goes on this quest, and Shoeless Joe appears, and Shoeless Joe sends him off to find, well, in the novella, he has to find J.D. Salinger, the actual writer. It's a very interesting part of the story, but they changed that because they were worried J.D. Salinger, who is a noted recluse, would have sued them if they had used his name in it. So they created the character of Terrence Mann, who was played by James Earl Jones. They go to find Terrence Mann, and they have to watch a game in Fenway, and another secret message appears on the scoreboard, which sends Ray to Chisholm, Minnesota. And Terrence Mann at the last minute admits that he saw it too. So off they go together to find Archibald Moonlight Graham, who was also a real baseball player who only played in 1 inning in the major leagues. W.P. Kinsella, who wrote the book, was an avid fan, loved the baseball encyclopedia, found this guy who it looked like had only played in 1 game for his entire career and never got to bat. Anyway, he brought him into the novella. They find Moonlight Graham, who's now a doctor in Minnesota, and they bring him back to the field, and he gets to play as Archibald Graham.
It's beautiful. It involves redemption. It involves righting some wrongs from the past, and these things. So I'm a little curious about some of the actors that are in it. You mentioned so by this time Ray Liotta didn't have a huge name. He had done some work, but I don't know if he had any like one big hit. He certainly hadn't done any of his biggest work, but he fit the part because he just looked dangerous standing there.
Right. I think that's what Phil needed from that character, is someone who evokes a kind of presence even when they're not doing anything. And Ray certainly does that. He had, he obviously went on to a great career, but he'd only done a few movies and usually tends to play scary people.
And then you got a chance to meet Bert Lancaster, who I found it interesting. You were always enamored with guys like Jimmy Stewart and Bert Lancaster and some of the greats from that era. And here he is. You get to meet one of these guys.
Yeah, that was just such a joy. And I was only originally hired to be in the movie. I had a 3-day contract for Field of Dreams. I ended up staying for 2 weeks, and I could talk about that later. But I just happened to be, one of my first days was Bert Lancaster's last day, so I just desperately wanted to say hello at least. This is just, he was an idol of mine, and he was. Everybody was saying he was kind of grumpy for the whole shoot. It was there was a drought in Iowa when we were shooting the movie. The corn wouldn't grow, but it was really hot. And Lancaster was the kind who'd wear his wool suit with his overcoat and sit out in the sun and try to guilt trip the director, who was his second time directing, and he's basically a writer. He was trying to, kind of make him feel bad and get the, production moving. And so he was a bit grumpy. And I also think because, Bert Lancaster was a world-class athlete. I mean, he had a baseball scholarship to Syracuse, I think, and he was an acrobat who did, a show in vaudeville. I think it was hard for him to watch the younger guys, out on the field playing when he was, kind of no longer able to. And anyway, so he was kind of, everybody was saying, please don't go near Bert. He'll chew your head off. And I just couldn't help myself. And fortunately, he was very, very nice. And we just had a very, I got to tell him how much I admired him. And, he gave me the little wink. And
nice.
Anyway, it was great.
He must have also been a good swimmer, because I remember him rolling around in the sand and not drowning in From Here to Eternity.
Right. Yeah. And he did the swimmer too. Is that the one where he swims across the pool? Yeah.
Anyway. The other things that were interesting, you mentioned that there was a drought going on in Iowa at that time. And so there was this concern, but the guy who owned the place was Don Lansing, and he owned the farm, and he kind of benefited on some level because he got his house remodeled, and then his corn grew when everybody else was taking a hit because they put so much extra effort into that.
Yeah, that's true. I think Don Lansing was the guy whose life changed even more than mine by the movie, picking his farm out of a million farms. I mean, they were actually going to shoot the movie in Canada because at the time, I don't know if you remember, but the dollar was very strong in Canada, and a lot of productions were going up to Vancouver, and they were going to shoot this at a farm in Ontario, and it was, just hours away from being a done deal. And somebody sent up another videotape of flybys of farms in Iowa, and Phil chose this one instead. But this guy was a bachelor who was living in the house he had been born in, but living there alone, and it was trashed. I mean, he was he was just kind of a nerdy farmer who, so that the production crew came in and tore out walls so that the camera could move more freely inside the house. They, put a new staircase. They put that wraparound porch around it. They put in the bay windows and put in air conditioning in this house that was, 120 years old, that had never even thought about it. So, yeah. And then on top of that, when the corn wouldn't grow, they got special permission to water his corn. And so, the other local farmers around were pretty jealous.
I'll bet.
They also had the good sense. They just watered the corn that was around where the field was going to be built, because the movie starts out, there's no field there, but they figured that as you look down the corn rows into the distance, the corn gets smaller anyway because of perspective. And if they could just get the corn around the field to be big enough that we could walk into it without looking like, we're walking into knee-high corn. But anyway, they got very lucky when they started putting the water on the corn in that heat. It just grew like it was in a greenhouse, to the point that the corn got too tall. So they're trying to shoot Kevin watering the corn, and you can't even see him because the corn's 9 feet tall. So they had to build a little platform between the rows of corn so that Kevin could walk and be seen above it like he's examining the corn. And but if he'd walked in a few more steps, he would have dropped right off the platform and into the abyss.
I was cracking up on how you said that, like, Don would just show up, all of a sudden you turn around and you just be there, and it was almost like he was coming out of the corn, just to pop up at the oddest times and then just carry on a conversation with you.
Yeah, he was really just an eccentric, very, very funny guy. And because I'd grown up with farmers my whole life, I used to bale hay for local farmers, and sometimes there's a reason why people live so far out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Don was a very friendly guy, and he couldn't have been more excited. He was the master of ceremonies for their 4th of July parade that year, because he sat on the back of a convertible as they drove through downtown Dyersville. He was like a local celebrity from this farmer who, wasn't even making a full living at farming. He had a daytime job with John Deere tractor factory. So he was hanging out with movie stars, and so yeah, he was pretty stoked.
Hey everyone, Marley here. We are so proud to have secured a new sponsor. My organization, welcome to the SSDL family.
Point of pride for a Dodger fan like myself is that it was the Dodgers field maintenance guy or team that came out to do the construction of the field.
Yeah, and boy, did we need them because once they got the corn to the right height, then we started. Like the weekend it was tall enough, then they had to chop it all down to build the baseball field, which was, kind of ironic that they spent all this time to get the corn 7 feet tall just so they could plow it under with a tractor. And they managed to put in that whole baseball field on 4th of July weekend. They got four local high school baseball teams to come and volunteer carrying the sod out there and laying it out. And, they just did a fantastic job, a lot of labor over a weekend because they couldn't afford to lose the shooting days at that point. And, as soon as they laid the sod down, it just died. I mean, it was, 90 plus degrees every day. So the beautiful sod they'd put in looked beautiful and green for 2 days, and then it turned brown immediately. So these guys from Dodger Stadium just painted it. They'd ride around on the back of the little gators with a huge, Hudson sprayer, and they just sprayed the whole thing green. And you see it, and it looks gorgeous. But I remember when we would do the scene, when we were walking, just, walking across the field to, having our little conversation between, Ray Kinsella and his dad, you hear, it felt like you were walking on Easter grass. It was just crunchy. And, it's kind of unnerving. And, the sound people were having fits because, it wasn't like walking on grass where it's fairly quiet. It was more like walking on gravel,
It's so interesting because the whole movie has, this kind of mystical quality to it. There's certainly, you're starting to get this feeling, if you build it, he will come, and you think it's about Shoeless Joe, or you think he's having some redemption with his father because he's given Shoeless Joe and those guys that were blackballed an opportunity to play again. And then just as you do catch on and he doesn't get to go out in the corn like James Earl Jones' character does, that he points over and there you are. And that scene, if you could just kind of explain a little bit about the magic hour and how they decided to shoot that. But it came out brilliant, and it signifies everything that you want that scene to be. And I think that's why it has such resonance. But maybe you could tell a little bit about how they shot that day after day in the magic hour.
Yeah. Like I said, I'd been hired for 3 days. They were just going to shoot that scene just like any other scene and, down and dirty and get it done. But when I got there, they were already way behind shooting because the corn wouldn't grow, and they had to shoot everything that didn't involve corn and try to wait for the corn to arrive. And among those decisions, they decided to shoot that scene at magic hour, which is that 15 minutes of golden light just after sunset. So that meant that, we could only shoot a little chunk of it every day. It's only a 6-minute scene, but, it takes quite a bit longer than that, obviously, to shoot it. So they would be shooting inside the house, and it would get close to sunset, and, the production, coordinator would tell everybody, okay, out to the field, and the whole crew would run out there and set up the dolly track or, put up reflectors and all that kind of stuff. And then we'd get everything set up. We'd rehearse it a couple times, and then we'd just wait for just after the sun would go down. And John Lindley, who was the DP, would be checking his light meter. And then we'd say, okay, rolling action, and I'd say, is this heaven?
Yeah.
Give it to me again. Is this heaven? Okay, that's all we have time for today. Let's wrap, And then we come back the next day and turn it around, and Kevin would say, no, it's Iowa. No, it's Iowa. And so we pieced the scene together sort of that way because that's all we had time, all we had the light to do. And I think there was one day where there were more clouds in the sky than there had been any of the other days, and they realized that it wasn't going to match, so we had to just kind of cancel the corn shoot for that day. But as a result, we had to do the scene over and over and over and over again for 2 weeks, which is kind of difficult with a scene that's so tenuous and emotional and all that. But
I love how you were trying to get back into character, and then all of a sudden Don would come out of the corn and he'd say, "Hey."
Yeah, he was so sweet, but just really didn't understand the whole thing, So you'd be there trying to get into character and just ready for this big emotional scene. Hi, how's it going? Beautiful day, isn't it? You'd be like, "Thanks, Don. Yeah, I got it." But, he's just the sweetest guy, and to this day, we've stayed in touch. He's a great guy. The scene ended up, I think, as we kept doing it, I think even the cast or the crew members who were just doing the lights and all that stuff, they would get very quiet. Because I think, they started to realize that this was the kind of pivotal moment. And I think everybody who was living in Iowa when they wanted to be back home in LA or New York, they were missing people and missing their dads. And I think they all sort of felt that their own dads were there. And so they were really generous with Kevin and I when we would shoot that scene. Everybody would be very, very respectful. And, and I think they're bringing their fathers to the scene helped give that scene more resonance, in the final product.
There was a lot of pressure on you guys to make sure you kept the ball in the air, no drops on that catch, because you were doing all of these in increments, and you had to deal with like a 1950s catcher's mitt. Yeah,
they gave me this mitt that was just a solid rock, it had to look period and all that stuff, and what was weird about it is you could really not even tell when the ball had hit the mitt. So I was just, because I thought, I hadn't thought of this at all because, playing catch, I wasn't supposed to play baseball. I wasn't worried about it. I went to the batting cage a few times, but I wasn't too concerned about it. But then I suddenly realized, like, what if they build this whole movie, and everybody's getting emotional and there's the father, oh my gosh. And then they throw the ball to me and hits the mitt and drops. And I'm like, what an idiot I would have looked like. And, and because we were shooting this in these little 15-minute increments, I knew we weren't going to get a lot of coverage, a lot of takes on these things. So, I just made sure that I did not drop the ball. So, some of my friends tease me about how it looks like I'm, the ball hits the mitt and my hand's over it. Like, oh, I was desperate not to look foolish in it. But, it's nerve wracking. You never think of that when you're just playing catch with your kid, your son or your daughter out in the yard. But, when you've got a $1 million shot hanging on it, you take extra care.
There's what's okay. So then this pivotal scene, the wonderful scene they shot of all the cars coming, they're brilliant how they do that. It's really detailed well in the book. But then I think you get a inkling of what's going on because you go and you stand in the back of a theater and watch it one time, and you see the emotion that comes out. So all of that effort paid off, and it really does have this crazy resonance with people that watch it, and you got to see that firsthand. And even right now I'm watching the comments that are coming by, and somebody said they met you in Hudson Valley and had a catch. Somebody else says my dad was a little league coach, and you could just see people connected so strongly with that, and then it started to really follow you in your life.
Yeah, it was a very strange experience. I'd, been acting for 9 or 10 years when that happened. But it wasn't the type of role, generally speaking, that I'd get, recognized in public. Even Stuart Cleary in The Thornbirds was that was a very popular miniseries. But it was only after Field of Dreams that, I would just have people kind of eyeing me from across a store or something. And I would think, I'm like, oh gosh, do I know that person? And they'd come over and they'd be like, did we go to high school together? And I said, I don't know. I went to high school in Ohio. I doubt it. And then they'd be, oh my, are you an actor? You were in Field of Dreams, weren't you? You were the father. And I'd be like, yeah, this would be years later. I just couldn't believe people had that kind of memory for faces or something. And frequently it would go into a very touching story about their fathers and how that movie reminds them, every year they watch it at the beginning of baseball season. And, because my father had died just 30 days before I went to go shoot the movie, it it made those encounters that much more resonant for me, because I felt like it was my dad's way of checking in with me, through somebody else. And I still get emotional. I mean, a lot of these guys, I see them at ballparks, and everybody's just having a good time watching a minor league baseball game, and people break out these stories that, I wonder if they've ever told anybody before. And for some reason, because of my place in that movie, they feel like we have this rapport, and that, they need to tell me about their dad because, I substituted for their dad after he was gone, or whatever. And it's very touching.
And some really moving revelations that might have never came out had that movie not prompted this. So whether it's a woman who goes with who she thinks is her uncle, who's been there her whole life because she thinks her father died in the war, in the Vietnam War, but in fact he is her father, and finally admits it to her for reasons he had to keep that hidden. Or a son is able to come out to his father and say, I'm gay. Or somebody and it's story after story, and it's so beautiful because somehow that scene just triggers that emotion, and it allows for that father, son, or daughter, father, or whatever, to make that leap.
Yeah. What's interesting is for the 25 years, I thought that this was happening to James Earl and to Phil Robinson, the director, and Kevin and stuff, that people were coming up, and it only when I was getting around to writing the book that I realized, well, if you run into Kevin Costner somewhere, there's a dozen movies you want to talk to him about, and and James Earl the same way. But for me, even though I've done 100 other shows, this is the one that resonates. So, and because those guys did such a great job of opening the audience's heart, and then I just kind of take my catcher's mask off and walk right into their hearts, I think it's my face that they associate with that moment, which is just great good luck on my part. But it made it feel more important that I write the book and kind of try to share some of those stories and the effect that it's had on me, and clearly has had on a lot of people who've seen the movie.
Absolutely. So yeah, again, I really encourage everybody to get and read the book. It's beautiful as you go through it.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Dwier Brown. If you're interested in purchasing his book, you can head on over to dwierbrown.com to purchase If You Build It. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next week. Thanks for watching and listening. Sports Stories with Denny Lennon is produced by Christine Jinbo and me, Marley Rice. Directed by Chris M. Alport with studio support from Alpha Command Unit, and shot by bad boy Bobby McCall.
Original music courtesy of Lennon Music Production, and original images courtesy of Sienna Lennon Photography. A big thank you to all of our contributors. Sports Stories with Denny Lennon is a production of Sports Stories Inc. You can find us on audio platforms everywhere and the High School Narrative iOS app. You can also view Denny's shows on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV.
Make sure to press that subscribe button, give us a review, leave a comment. It will really help us grow the show.
Hey, you know what else would help us grow the show? Hustle on over to patreon.com/Denny Lennon to get some never-before-seen videos, pictures, interviews, and more.
We are all over social media and constantly sending out clips on Facebook, conducting fun polls on Twitter, going live on Instagram, and more.
To find all our social media links, hustle on over to sportstoriesdl.com.
SSDL proudly supports the My Stuff Bags Foundation and the Heroes Movement.
The My Stuffed Bags Foundation, with the help of thousands of people across the country, provides children in unfortunate situations with new belongings and new hope through its innovative My Stuffed Bags program. Heroes Movement is a nonprofit that bridges the gap from therapy to getting strong again through small group workouts for any veteran of the United States Armed Forces for free. Links to how you can support and help these foundations can be found on our website. We want to give a big thank you to our partners of the show.
So, as Coach Lennon would say, any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email me, Marley, at info@sportsstoriespodcast.com.
Sports Stories thanks all of our followers and listeners. And we will see you next time. Hey, thanks, Marley.
Thanks, Chris.
You light up my life. You give me hope to carry on. You light up my days and fill my nights. short stories with Denny Lennon. It'll light up your life.
Kick it out, Book!